When it's like me, I go out of my mind. It's like me, baby, I've reached the pressure line.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very, very special edition of the MNCAA podcast. We've got a Gopher NCAA tournament preview show. It's going to be really heavy on Gopher talk, obviously, the Fargo Regional. But yeah, the Gophers obviously on the heels of a very disappointing loss to Michigan again in the Big Ten tournament championship game. 4-3. We'll talk about that a little bit here too, but we're gonna really focus on the Fargo Regional, the Gophers opening matchup, and a little bit more just about the Gophers, how they got here, their strengths, their weaknesses going forward. But excited to welcome in a very fun panel of guests here. We have Nate Wells, my former co-host at that Gopher Hockey Puckcast, and very, very many other places. Welcome, Nate.
Drew, it's great to be reunited.
I'm very happy that we were able to make this happen today, but very, very excited to chat about the Gophers again for an extended period of time. We've also got the proprietor of the Sota Pod himself, State of Hoppy. How are you doing, Hoppy?
I appreciate you inviting me, and also appreciate that you made it very clear that we have an expert, a former player, and a fan.
Exactly. Big fan, Hoppy, and that leads me right to our next guest as well, Jack Ramsey, former Gopher player himself. Jack, great to have you on. Thanks for joining us today.
Excited to be here. Excited to talk some Fargo Regional. Appreciate it, guys.
Absolutely. So let's jump right into it. We saw it was kind of speculated, obviously, as the Gophers maintained the 1 seed, even though they lost to Michigan yesterday in the Big Ten tournament championship game. They still held on to the number 1 overall seed, so that meant that they get to play Canisius, the number 41 team in the pairwise, even after beating Holy Cross 3-0 in their Atlantic Hockey Championship game. But guys, I guess let's discuss a little bit. What do we know about Canisius? I don't know a whole lot. I know that the Gophers have played them once in their history, and that was a little over 10 years ago. So we'll see.
I covered that game. It was like 1-0. It was a very, very tough game because the goalie just stood on his head.
1-0, and Adam Wilcox's first shutout.
Yeah,
it was his first Gopher shutout. Trader Jack here. All right, we got GPL in the chat. All right,
love that. Pressure's on.
Hey, you just get on a lot of podcasts. That's all. It's you do the podcast and you get on with it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So obviously the Gophers getting the 16 team into the tournament. I do have to mention a little upset, disappointed that Alaska wasn't able to make it in. Obviously after the run that they had this season, it would have been cool to see them in the NCAA tournament. But obviously this first round matchup is a little bit overshadowed, I think, by what we're able to see in looming if the Gophers can get past Canisius in the second part of the Fargo Regional. And it should be said first, the Gophers are playing Canisius at 8 p.m. Central on ESPN2. That should be a very interesting game, to say the least, the number 1 versus the number 41 team in the pairwise. But also looming beyond that game is St. Cloud or Minnesota State Mankato. Guys, I guess I'll start with Nate here. Go around the room. What are your thoughts on the look of this regional and some familiar faces for the Gophers?
Very familiar faces. I basically called it last night that they're going to swap that 6-11 matchup into Fargo. I mean, you only have one true West regional. You have a pure Minnesota matchup. I don't know why you wouldn't switch that when it's so close. The big thing, though, with Minnesota is they get to play Canisius. They're playing the Atlantic Hockey Champion. Give credit to the Golden Griffins. They are entering on a hot streak. They were 7-2-1 in February. They took down a Holy Cross team who took down the top 2 teams in Atlantic hockey. They have a lot of transfers that came in and kind of gelled at the right time. And it's always tough to win a conference tournament and facing a team and getting into the NCAA tournament. So facing a team like that is always tough. But at the same time, I mean, if you want to face one team in the first round, these are all tough teams. You probably want to face a team that's about 15, 20 spots lower than in the pairwise than any other one.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jack, what are your thoughts kind of on this potential matchup? And obviously kind of lopsided in terms of the competition, pairwise ranking, that type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean the headline is obviously who's in the region, and I hope the team doesn't overlook the first game. And no shade at Bob, but it's a Moscow coach team, and we know the history of 16 versus 1. So hopefully they don't overlook them. I mean, they're barely over 500. Got to prepare the right way, prepare like you do every other weekend, and not look too much forward to Saturday. You're gonna have to win a hockey game. Those kids have scholarships too, right? So it's gonna be a good game.
Exactly. And Hoppy, you got there's no Holy Cross rematch. Are you happy about that? I know probably some Gophers fans of old are definitely very, very happy about that.
Thrilled. That was very concerning for me. But I mean, to your point before, I'm not less worried about Canisius. Like, it's still just like it lingers. It's happened to the Gophers. Obviously, it's in Bob's history. Like, I don't want to play anyone else instead, but it still just is an uneasy feeling until we get in and see the start of that game.
Yeah, and kind of what are you guys' thoughts too on I guess Bob mentioned after the game, he said it was good that this game, that the way it happened against a competitive team, obviously not the loss, but he mentioned that it was a good time to see that team. Do you guys agree? Do you disagree? I guess I'll start with Jack. I mean, you've kind of been in that type of situation where it's like, all right, you gotta gear up for a really tough opponent by playing another tough opponent. What are your thoughts on kind of that, playing Michigan and kind of getting into the tournament with a pretty competitive team in your past?
Yeah, I totally agree with Bob there. I mean, you can look at the other side and look at Canisius, and they're playing, Army, Niagara, Holy Cross, and then you have the Gophers in the first round, and they haven't seen a team of that caliber all year. So I'll take playing Michigan and losing to Michigan and playing that high caliber teams, and just, again, don't overlook your opponent, but you're going to be playing a similar level team to Michigan on Saturday anyway. So I think it's a blessing that and a good bump in the road. Hopefully, that they got bounced by Michigan. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, Nate, to you, I think it is a very interesting thing to play a tough team and to play a team that I mean, you would think that the same quality of team you're facing in Michigan is going to be what you have to face in the Frozen Four or the national championship game, right?
You're going to have to play a tough team to get to win in 4 games. There's all these teams that win. How often in the last 10 years has a 4 seed or the last at large bid won the national tournament? It's at least three times. So really, you can almost throw the seeds out. Once you're in the tournament, really anything can happen. We just had a conference tournament where Holy Cross nearly won as the 7th seed. Colorado College nearly won the NCHC as the 7th seed. They beat the top 2 teams in that conference, and a conference that has won multiple national championships in a row. So you're going to have to play a tough team. You're going to be facing adversity. No one's going to go through these 4 games unscathed, and you have to you learn about yourself when you're tested. And Minnesota had that happen on a Saturday night. So I think that it's great that they learned about themselves, and certainly they learned about themselves in a single elimination situation. And now they get the real version of it this weekend, and hopefully in a couple more weeks.
Yeah, I guess, Hoppy, I'll kind of address some of those comments you put up there too. I mean, why number 1 getting punished? I mean, I know, Nate, we talked a little bit before about kind of why this is. Can you kind of explain kind of why the number 6 pairwise team is kind of the next up in the Fargo regional with the number 1 overall? Yeah,
so to start, and I did bracketology for the NCAA website for several years. So just if anyone's wondering where this is coming. So basically, to start, a 1 seed must play a 4 seed, a 2 seed must play a 3 seed. They aren't locked in bracket integrity. And in this case, the 8, if you do the straight 1, 16, 8, 9, the 8 seed overall is Penn State. They host the Allentown Regional, so they must be in Allentown. And the easy flip would have been to just have Harvard, who's the 7th overall, play Ohio State, who's the 9th overall. But then the other difference is that 6 and 11 are St. Cloud State and Minnesota State. So if you have that as a regular one and you have that matchup already happening, there's not much of a difference. You're getting a little bit punished by having a higher 2 seed, but you're getting a little bit better by having a lower 3 seed. So it evens out on that, and it's kind of the NCAA's committee's thinking. And they did this something very similar 5 years ago in Sioux Falls, where, again, Motzko was on the same thing, where this team was number 1 overall, St. Cloud, where Mankato was 6 overall and Duluth was 12 overall. And they moved that match up from out east to Sioux Falls to have the 3 Minnesota teams. So it is like in a way where, yes, you have a higher 2 seed, but on the other hand, it's not as lopsided as it could be.
Yeah, that's true. Obviously, and Jack and Hoppy too. I'll let you guys jump in here just about the Minnesota only regional. Obviously, we've had in recent memory, we've had 3 Minnesota teams in the Frozen Four. Now there can only be one. Obviously, kind of stacking them in terms of flights, in terms of travel. What are you guys' thoughts kind of on the three Minnesota teams and then the one outlier in the one regional?
Makes sense, but it doesn't make sense, right? Like, you can have one Minnesota team in that Fargo regional and tickets are going to sell. That's kind of the frustrating thing. But then you want to keep teams out east, so they sell tickets. And I wish at the end of the day it wasn't about selling tickets and saving money, but that's a huge thing that goes into it. And like I point out, people are saying, why didn't we get Harvard? And you pull up the RPI points right now too, and the difference is 0.002 between St. Cloud and Harvard. So I think it's Harvard. I would say is just as good a team, if not better than St. Cloud. It's just probably Gopher fans that have a little bit of fear, honestly, of having to play that team or having to play Mankato that has ended our seasons the past 2 years. But I'm kind of excited about it. I look at it, the glass half full. I hope Mankato, wins their first game, and I hope we get to exercise some demons in all honesty. So.
Yeah, I mean, not great, right? We want to have more Minnesota teams get in. And to Jack's point, like, I'm not excited about facing Alpha St. Cloud. Like, I think that they're a really good team. But, I mean, them versus Harvard, who cares? Coin flip. It's more that Penn State would have been awesome if they weren't hosting. I'd much rather play them than either of those two teams. But it goes back, we were talking before we jumped on here. I mean, Nate, please tell me, how close are you to the West Regional as well as one of the East Regionals?
All right, so I am just outside New York City right now, and basically the same distance driving-wise from Allentown as I am from Bridgeport, Connecticut. I think Bridgeport is technically maybe 20 miles closer. It's about the same distance driving-wise. So it is a little bit ridiculous that one is considered East and one is considered West. But at the end of the day, it raises just the bigger question is that the NCAA really struggles to get Western venues to bid on these regionals. My last year, there was none in the Midwest, because one was Allentown, one was Loveland, Colorado. So all these regionals are happening kind of on the fringes. Fargo is probably the closest to all the Minnesota schools, and that's still not that close. There's just not buildings that are able to meet the NCAA specifications unless you play at XL, and XL is almost too big. It's just too big for a regional.
Well, and they're not interested, right?
Yeah.
Like, they make way more money off any other event than they will for a college regional.
If any school wanted to work with the XL, they could do so in Minnesota. None of them want to do it. None want to pony up the money. Minnesota did it for a long time. They've kind of shifted their priorities to hosting more of these championship events. The XL hosts the Frozen Four next year. They have the women's Frozen Four coming up in a couple of years at Ritter. They are hosting the Final Four coming up in the near future as well. So that's kind of where their priorities are. And yeah, no one else wants to host a regional. And the same thing's true in Michigan. There's 7 schools in Michigan. No one's hosted a regional there in a decade. No one's hosted one in Ohio in a decade as well. I think they finally get back on in 3 years. So it's just a Midwest problem all around that needs to be solved.
Yeah, and that's something too that I've always thought. I'm like, man, it's always in these tiny little towns, not tiny little towns. Sorry,
Mhm.
Fargo, but it's in towns that are harder to get to
Yeah.
via plane. I mean, if it's far away, I mean, consider like if it's in Manchester, like it's been for the Gophers at times. Like that's a tough flight. Slash, you have to get work in. You have to work in rental car. You have to work in a lot of driving time from wherever the next major slash cheapest airport to go into is, and um, yeah, it's just it's always something that's kind of boggled my mind a little bit too. But um, looks like Hoppy's got the next one lined up here from Anthony. Why does Michigan get a cakewalk to the Frozen Four though? Any any thoughts? I know a lot of people are saying that it does seem like it's a little bit easier for Michigan in their regional so far, and not having to go through the gauntlet. Maybe that's it. Could that be a Minnesota bias too, in terms of saying, "Boy, you've seen these teams and you know how tough it is to play against the St. Clouds and Mankato's of the world." Obviously, Mankato's not exactly what it was last year or the year before, but yeah, I mean something about ending the season 2 years in a row with a lot of the same guys on the team. That's got to stick in their brains a little bit. And the Gophers have been outscored 9-1 in those two games. Um, they've been known to kind of change the Gophers' results in terms of especially how well that they play and how dominant I think the teams have been over the past few years. And Mankato's made them look anything but that type of team. But any thoughts on I don't know why Michigan might be getting a little bit more favorable of a regional as a one seed?
Well, I wouldn't know if I'd say that having to go to a regional in Penn State's backyard that has Penn State is like the easiest regional. Because I mean that's always a difficult thing. You're basically playing a road game there. On the other hand, yeah, they do get a little bit of an easier just because of a first round matchup because Quinnipiac can't play Colgate, who's the 15 seed, because they're both ECAC members. So that certainly helps them. I think Tech's an interesting team. They have NCAA tournament experience. They match up well with Michigan. I don't think it's as easy as whoever did the question said it for Michigan as far as the regional goes. It just might be just not as familiar with the teams, which is fine.
Gotcha. Yeah, and Jack, obviously, I think having played the game and taking a lot of time off to Jupe's question there, a lot of time off. These Gophers teams have taken some time off, and obviously you could see they've played one game in the last however many days. I mean, they haven't played a lot in the last month or so. Can you speak to playing a team that either to being the team that hasn't played a lot in recent weeks, or to kind of playing against that type of team? I mean, what's that kind of like, kind of gearing back up to get ready for obviously one of the most important games of your season after having not played a lot?
It's a good question. Yeah, it's tough because you can't simulate that, right? You can go down to Rochester and you can do a scrimmage game, but you cannot simulate the real thing. And it was kind of evident last night too. And a lot of people saw that we looked a little bit sluggish, a little bit tired. I seemed to tilt one way for quite a bit of time. I think Penn State, that's tough too for like a team that is kind of get up and go and get pucks deep, get pucks on net from anywhere. Are they going to be able to find that game right out of the gate? We'll see. And I think for the Gophers, it goes back to, like you said, we didn't have our legs, but we were able to play a really good team the last game of the season. So I'm feel confident about that. But that Penn State Michigan Tech, it's not the sexiest matchup in the world at all. But I just don't think it's a walk in the park really for Michigan either.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true, and I do think it is some of the Minnesota the recent results, and even just this season too. I mean, Minnesota struggled against St. Cloud, lost a game on Friday, and won a game in overtime back at Mariucci, and then a win and a loss against Minnesota State too. So even though both teams aren't up at obviously very number one like they've been in a lot of recent years, they've given the Gophers a lot of fits. But reading through Veach's question, friend of the show, Duluth correspondent for MNCAA, Max Veach in the chat here. Minnesota playing more of a road game in their first matchup than Michigan is with the North Dakota fan base holding more than half the tickets. So do you think a lot of North Dakota fans are gonna show up and jeer the Gophers through that first game or second game? Obviously, if they get there.
I think the big difference is going to be it's less North Dakota. There'll be North Dakota fans there. I covered that Sioux Falls Regional in 2018, where it was St. Cloud State, Mankato, and UMD, and North Dakota missed and Minnesota missed. Sorry, Jack. But that was like it was a weird mix of you had all the teams. No one had like the majority fan base. And there were some North Dakota fans, but there weren't a ton of North Dakota fans. It's obviously Fargo's closer than Sioux Falls, so it might be more incentive to stick around. But I'm kind of curious to see how that ticket situation is because so many of them have been sold with the belief that North Dakota was going to be in the tournament. And since they're not, do they sell the tickets? Do they go empty? Do people show up?
Yeah, I mean, Gopher fans in the chat. I mean, if you had tickets to a game, I mean, let's say the regional was being hosted at the X. Not really realistic right now, but if you had tickets and North Dakota was there and the Gophers weren't, would you go to specifically Hoppy? Hoppy's number one. I do have a feeling that a lot of Gopher fans would do that. I mean, it hasn't obviously the rivalry hasn't been the same since they don't play each other every year. But I think in a lot of fans' hearts, especially the fans that saw the end of the WCHA, those games were so tough. I mean, not the end, but I mean, the last 10, 15 years were just ultra competitive, especially. And I think that definitely has got to stick with a lot of people, right?
I mean, I got to weigh in on this one because I took Isha, my co-host on the Sota pod, who is Canadian and has not really experienced college hockey. Like, kind of thought college hockey was a joke compared to junior. And his first game was North Dakota at 3M Arena at Mariucci.
Oh,
That feels weird to say. He came out of that game. He's like, I'm going to be like a Bemidji State fan. Like, they're so like harmless and they got a beaver as their mascot. Like, why wouldn't I? Came out of that game like more sure than ever that he is a Gopher fan and that he absolutely hates North Dakota. I think that like it sucks. I wish that there was like regularly scheduled matchups with them like the old WCHA days, but I personally think that playing less, those games get that much more intensified. Like people show up and they're like, I paid 2x what this ticket should cost. I'm going to make sure people know I'm here. But I don't know. Maybe you guys have a different thought. But real quick, anyone that's been chiming in already, thank you so much. We'll keep on throwing in the comments, throwing up any questions. Let us know what you guys are drinking too. I'm actually drinking our collaboration with Lupulin, Tourney Flow. Can art turned out beautiful, and I can promise you, if you like IPAs, the beer turned out beautiful as well.
Is that Jack's likeness on the can there?
Yeah,
It's got some flow going. Looks like it. Looks like it could be.
I think we can work that out. That's pretty good. Maybe in next year's edition, we can figure that out. And I mean, hey, shout out. You can talk about it here in a second, Jack, but your boys take down the AA trophy. That was awesome. No one wanted Edina to win. No one. But anyone that's watching on Twitter right now, go over to YouTube right now, subscribe, start commenting there because you won't be able to comment in Twitter. But Jack, real quick for the tourney flow, tell us, like, what was it like for the boys to take that one in?
Pretty crazy. It was like the Edina was probably the only team in the tournament that we could have played in the championship where the fans were cheering for us. I was surprised about that when they announced the two teams and everybody was booing Edina. Everybody was loud from Ncaa, and I was like, nice. This is a good change of pace. But it was good. I thought it was a kind of a mirror game. Like both teams were dead even in the state championship. We were chasing a little bit at times. And that was one of the few times that happened this year. And I think Edina played us perfectly, and we just had a few bounces go our way, which take what you can get, right? But unbelievable atmosphere, unbelievable group of guys. I was my 16-year-old self was very jealous of them, but my coach self very, very proud. So it's pretty funny.
Gosh, yeah, that's awesome. I mean, state tournament, right? I mean, we talk about it this time every year, just how big of a deal it is for so many people, and obviously being extremely connected to it as yourself, it's got to be just an amazing feeling. But moving on, especially to NCAA tournament, and kind of talking a little bit more about the regional. I mean, I want to get a little bit of thoughts in here. Oh, Caleb's in the chat. I do had to pause for this one, but. 3-0-1 against this regional this season. I take it Yeah. Okay. We'll see how that goes. Go Huskies, woo. All right. Classic hashtag in the chat. We'll see. I mean, I don't want to get too ahead on predictions here, but I kind of want to jump into what you guys all think is going to happen through this regional into Fargo, to who's going to make it to the Frozen Four. I mean, I guess Hoppy, let's start with you. What do you think is going to happen coming out of this regional?
It's kind of bizarre for me because I don't know what to expect from that 2-3 matchup. Like on paper, St. Cloud is absolutely the better team, but Mankato's figuring out at the right time. Like they've definitely had their ups and downs this season, but obviously no one's going to question the coaching there of Hastings. Like short of not really having their true like lean on me goal scorer like Nathan Smith, they're kind of looking a lot like they have in recent years. So do I think they're coming out of the regional? No. But do I think they could be a handful and a problem for St. Cloud and potentially upset that one? They could. And I would love that. To Nate's point earlier, exercise some of those demons, beat Mankato. And I just think on paper, Mankato's a better matchup than St. Cloud for us. But that game right there might determine a lot. I'm definitely more scared of St. Cloud. I think that could be a really interesting matchup. Gophers have to play a completely different game if they're taking those guys on. I think if it's Mankato, you can play a little bit more your game. I don't know. But no matter what, I'm saying Gophers advance. So here we go.
All right, Jack, on to you. What are your thoughts? Who do you think is going to emerge into the Frozen Four out of the Fargo?
Man, I think that 2 of the 3 games will probably go to overtime. I think that first game between Cloud and Mankato will go to overtime, and whoever we get in the second game, probably be a nail biter too. I just don't think that this is the Mankato teams of the past. Right? There's a lot of turnover, I think, and I think St. Cloud probably gets the best of them, and then it's a toss up, right? Like I know you just said that we kind of match up better against Mankato, but the past few years, like our offense just gets completely shut down. So I honestly like to see kind of the strengths go head to head with St. Cloud, and I think we have more firepower right now. So it kind of comes down to goaltending in the back end and special teams. So I like our chances. Again, everybody's scared of the region because it's 3 Minnesota teams. But if you kind of look past that, this is not the Mankato team of the past. Like I think every region has probably 2 good teams, and I think the Gophers and St. Cloud are those 2 teams, and I think we can get the best of them.
All right, Nate, you gonna say the Gophers advance as well, or I mean, that's assuming they have to beat Canisius first. But do you think they're making it to the Frozen Four?
They have the skill. They have the ability to make to the Frozen Four. The number 1 overall seed for a reason. They have many ways to win a game, and that's the biggest difference between this Gopher team and the last few. Even kind of starting back, even going back to this entire Motzko era. Jack was there, kind of beginning there. It's a team. Actually, just I mean, like the year after your first year, you said all these leftovers. Players who know how to win and kind of were able to kind of teach those freshmen to learn to play just a high-end, high-quality game. And then kind of the next year, you as a very young team, they had to learn how to be leaders, learn to win these tough games on their own. And we've kind of seen it grow from year to year to year on this Motzko era. So it's one of those things where at this point with Minnesota, especially with the Frozen Four in general, you are going to face adversity. You're going to have to find different ways to win games and be able to limit mistakes. And Minnesota's been really good at limiting mistakes all year. The thing that is a little disappointing with this regional compared to maybe getting into Harvard, I mean, it wouldn't be the case if you had that Harvard Ohio State matchup. Anyways, you could still have a familiar foe. But Minnesota's been really good against teams the first time that they played them, before teams can make adjustments to them. And if they get past Canisius, they'll face teams that they've played twice already this year. So they lose a little bit of that edge. But at the same time, I do think that Minnesota has the ability to step up and win a defensive game. They can wait out a team and force them to make the mistake and take advantage there. Or they can even force teams to try to play their own games and fail on that end. So I think that the Gophers have the most ways to win. But as we know, at turning time, if you run into a hot goalie, there's nothing you can do. If you get a bounce go the other way, there's not much you can do. So you just want to put yourself in the best position. And I think Minnesota is in that best position right now.
Yeah. And I mean, go ahead, Hoppy.
Well, I was just going to say it's unique that like we're so mentally fragile as Gopher fans that because this is like a historically good team, like this is potentially the best line we've seen in decades, best blue line for sure that we've seen for the Gophers. And that makes us like more scared that they're just like destined to fail, which is just funny to me. I don't know.
Also, the fact that the two teams that feel destined to fail are Minnesota State, who for the longest time had not won an NCAA tournament game, no matter what. They're the number one overall seed at one point, lost to RIT. I think they went 0-7 or 0-8 before winning that first game. And St. Cloud State did something very similar in their history. And in recent history, lost as number 2 overall, lost as number 1 overall, lost as number 1 overall 3 times in 4 years.
Yeah, it's I mean, I do want to get to obviously to Baker 91's question, become more like comment here. Obviously a very I think well agreed upon comment, I think, here from everybody on the panel and a lot of fans out there too. But Jack, obviously you mentioned that obviously Minnesota State has done a really good job of shutting down Minnesota's offense in recent years, especially when they've met in the tournament. I got to think that obviously as well, I'm going to jump in the prediction part too. I think the Gophers get past Canisius, but if they do hit Minnesota State, I do wonder if that same type of structure can shut them down again. But I have to think too that this top line will have a way to break through because they've done it so far this year in just about almost any situation that they need them to really break through and kind of be the game changers that they are. I just don't see how Minnesota State, albeit they do have a few games of tape on them, but I do. When the Gophers did look sluggish last night, when they did look a little slow, Matthew Nyes took control. Logan Cooley took control. They both made really strong individual hustle plays. I think both with the puck and without the puck, which I think sets a really, really good example, obviously. But it's an intriguing thought to say, man, can the Gophers get over it because this line is so good? I mean, let's just talk about the elephant in the room, the big top line for the Gophers. How well do you think they can impact this team against Canisius, against Minnesota State going forward? Do you think they're the key to the national championship, to the Frozen Four? Obviously, I think Hoppy, let's start. You've enjoyed watching them really, really as a fan so far this year. What are your thoughts on them? On that line as a whole, and just what they've been able to provide for the Gophers, something that a lot of fans haven't seen from 3 guys on the same line in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, again, emphasis on fan. I don't know shit, but I honestly
no, Hoppy knows Hoppy. Let me preface this. Hoppy knows a lot about hockey, but man, he is a big Gophers fan. He's a big Gophers fan. I'm not trying to discredit your hockey knowledge. I gotta say.
You should. It makes sense. Honestly, man, it's been really fun to watch. Like, honestly, it's like on the edge of saying, is Jimmy Snuggerud a snub for top 10 for Hobie? Like, they've all been that good. Like, you can't point at one player. Like, sure, like Cooley probably stands out a little bit more for just his dynamic play, but those 3 are all contributing big things to that line, and it's really fun to watch. But I actually jumped on and joined Viggs and Jupe for one of their overtimes after recording the other week. And my thought is, no, they're not the driving force that'll determine whether we win or not, because they're going. Like, there's no off switch. It's electric. The second line will determine what the Gophers do this year. That second line has shown really good flashes. Like, Huglin and Pitlick, they just do things to me, man. When they're on, it's fun. And, oh, my God, nothing more than that Pitlick goal yesterday. God damn it. I was biting my fist instantly. If that line is going and can truly be that second scoring threat when really the third line has, for a lot of the year, been kind of that second in scoring, if they can show up and if they can do what we've seen in small spurts more consistently now over the course of, the few games that are remaining, there's no way this team doesn't win a natty.
Yeah, I mean, Nate, the depth of this team, I think, has been one of the strong suits for them, especially this year, and something that I don't know if it's necessarily hindered them in the last 2 years. Obviously, considering the way Minnesota State plays, just up and down their lineup, but um, it just feels like the depth this year is different, both up front and the back end. Do you think do you kind of agree with Hoppy there? That's kind of the key to victory, not just Nye, Snuggerud, Cooley, but the other guys down the line.
You need depth in the NCAA tournament, especially playing a top. You're going to play multiple top teams. These teams have top D pairings. They're able to stymie and slow down top forward lines. As good as the Nye's line has been, and they have been one of the best lines, if not the best, that I've seen play at Minnesota. So I mean, it's up there. But at the same time, you can't win a college championship with one line. You have to win with depth. And even you're seeing that with Minnesota in the defense. The defense has the depth. It's a lot of experience. They're able to play big minutes, but they also haven't been playing huge minutes throughout the year. So you think maybe that they might be a little bit more freshened up as we hit this NCAA tournament time. And you need to have players step up at this time of year that had maybe just you weren't expected. Maybe you get like a Jackson Nelson, maybe a Mason Nevers scores a big goal. You get something from Ryan Johnson, just players who you've seen perform in big moments, but maybe not be the first one that comes to mind. A lot of the times, those are the teams that win national championships. You have good depth on defense, you have good depth up front, and you're able to win in multiple ways.
Yeah, Jack, I think that'll be my next question to you. Kind of, who's your favorite depth guy in terms of who do you think can really make that difference and not necessarily surprise people, but maybe surprise the casual fans that are tuning in now that they've made the tournament and say, wow, this guy is really impactful. What do you think kind of there from guys not necessarily at the very forefront of the score sheet every night and kind of making that big difference?
That's a tough question because of the amount of depth. Like I was going to say, you look at the blue line and you can't say there's not really any sleeper guys on the back end.
Yep.
And side note, Hoppy, I call BS on no hockey knowledge because like you just read the script perfectly on depth and everything winning championships. I was going to say that was just perfect. But I really like Jackson Nelson. And I know he gets power play time and stuff like that, but he still is kind of in the shadows of the three studs. And that's just a big body guy that a St. Cloud matchup or a Mankato matchup that's a guy that needs to step up and take charge physically and be a presence on the ice for sure. But Hoppy covered it perfectly. Like the first line needs to get it done, but if the second and third line are plus at the end of the night, you're gonna win a championship, and it kind of falls on 4 through 9 at the end of the day. So,
yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right there. Brody Lamb last night kind of finding himself out there on a few chances. I mean, Cooley found himself out there on kind of middle line changes, and they made some good transition plays. It looks like both teams kind of went, and I remember there was a 2-on-1 with obviously Lamb and Cooley that obviously ended with the goal. But then Cooley and Pitlick, and it had a couple of good chances there on the line change too. But obviously, yeah, Brody Lamb is a big deal. I think Connor Kurth has had a few really good games. I think he's really studied from the Matthew Nyes camp of like, all right, let's learn how to be a possession monster, especially on the boards, and just to really take control and make sure that, you know what, if I'm the only guy down and with the puck on a line change, we're going to be able to make sure we can continue the zone presence too. But I got to move it back to the back end here. Like you mentioned, Jack, I mean, the back, there isn't a sleeper guy. I mean, you talk about how good this defense is, and usually I think Mike Kester doesn't get brought up, and you say, man, I think on almost any other team he'd be a number one guy. Almost any other team in the country, I think he'd be like a number one. Obviously he's played some on the power play too. He's been a really good. He had that game with a couple goals, but I mean, just how important. I mean, I think Bob has even said too that this is the most defensive depth I think he's ever had, or the most talented blue line he's ever had. Do you think that's something too? I mean, penalty kill, obviously, but in terms of just being solid defensemen and that kind of setting the tone throughout the lineup to realize that the forwards don't have to go out and score a million goals a night. Do you think that that definitely gives a calming presence to the team? And obviously starting with Brock Faber as the captain, but I mean, the defense has really shown out this year and kind of, I think, lived up to Bob's high praise.
100%. This is kind of like a rare thing of all these older guys on the back end that committed to coming back, and then you have the young forwards, but they don't look so young right now, right? You have that normal Gopher hockey team, and when they usually fall short is because you have freshmen that they might shrink in that moment, but we obviously have young guys that have not shrank. And I think that I think it's best to have that seniority on the back end, because I do think defense wins championships, and going from everything starts in your own end. So with Closer and that depth on the back end there, it's something rare, and they need to kind of seize this while they have it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people worried. Obviously, the Jack LaFontaine and transition to Justin Close right away after not really having played in college at all until he got thrust into the starter's net. Nate, I think a lot of people were worried about that transition, and I think he proved it down the stretch last year, but I think even more this season, he's shown that he's not just the beneficiary of a really strong defense. I think he's an extremely solid goaltender, and it seems positionally most of the time he's very, very on. In terms of also being able to steal games when the defense necessarily isn't. When a team like Wisconsin comes out, and I'm thinking of the Friday game at the Kohl Center late in the season. Justin Close won that game for them. They probably would have gotten swept at Wisconsin if it wasn't for how great Justin Close played. So, do you think he can? I certainly think he can keep this championship pace going, but it really has to help to have a guy that nobody necessarily believed in early on in his career to be a starter, and it's just gravy for him at this point, right?
I mean, so many players on this Gopher team have that NCAA tournament experience and have the Frozen Four experience last year that they're able to build on. And even seeing that team where you thought Minnesota had the tools and they were able to win a national championship, but they weren't probably going to win a national championship with Justin Close stealing a game. That wasn't how it was going to be. And especially when he went up against a team like Mankato, that ended up being the case. This year is certainly different. You mentioned Close has won at least a couple of games this year for the Gophers. He has that ability to steal a game. The book on him a lot last year, which is make him move side to side and just be able to create opportunities there and score in the open space. He's making those saves this year. He's making saves that he made that looked more acrobatic last year look fairly easy. His positioning is fantastic. He's confident. It helps to have one of the top two, if not the top defense in the country in front of him. But at the same time, he's certainly grown as much as anyone on this team. And they're a big reason why the Gophers have different ways to win a game. And another reason why that they went from last year where they were a 2 seed, who you could see winning a national championship, but probably not a team that would be a favorite, to a team that you can really consider to be a favorite to win a national championship.
Yeah, and I think next question I'll open to the floor for everybody. Just what's one player besides, I think, from the top line that you think really is going to need to? I know, Jack, you already mentioned Jackson Nelson being a really key member, but do you think there's somebody that's going to need to really jump up and say, wow, this was just the tournament of their life? I mean, 3-4 games of just pure dominance. And who do you think that can come from? And 2, who do you think that is? We can jump into Hoppy right away too.
I mean, I kind of already said it, and I'm cheating by kind of picking 2, but for me, it's Hughlin and Pitlick. Like, both of them have the skill. They've shown it in spurts. And with Pitlick, it's not even that I'm worried about him disappearing. He's a guy that is emotional. Dude wears that shit on his sleeve. And like, we saw it in that North Dakota game, right? Like, that was literally like 4 rows in front of me that he chucked the stick. I loved it. Even though they lost the game, like, I would not take that back. That's awesome. But we can't have that kind of play and those types of decisions happening now when it's lose and go home, right? So if he can keep his emotions in check and he can dominate like we saw against Michigan, he is the difference maker in my mind.
I always
Anything
feel like,
else? Oh, go
I always
for
feel
it,
like
Nate.
Mason Nevers is a player whose game really translates well to the NCAA tournament. And I mean, he's had success there, more success than there before. I think he scored like maybe one, if not his first, or one of his like first multi-goal games in that Omaha one during the COVID year. And he always seems to be someone who just pops up when you don't expect it. I also kind of do agree that Hugo Pitlick group, when they're on and they complement the top line. And really, if you get all two or all three of those guys going, just all those lines going, just the Gophers are very tough to beat. They are able to win with depth, and especially this time of year when you have teams who match up well, it's gonna be, you want to win with those depth. And yeah, I think like Nelson Nevers are always just those two guys that kind of just really pop out to me though. It's like the guys who like, you get like a gritty like OT goal or it's just something kind of, you're just like, oh wow, like I didn't expect that to happen.
Yeah, Jack, you mentioned the physicality of Nelson too. I mean, is that kind of play, is a player like that going to really have to some kind of just big brand of physicality really going to have to make the difference?
Yeah, I think so. Just because like the Mankato matchup and in recent history, they bully the Gophers around the ice a little bit. So you kind of have to give them a taste of their own medicine. And you have to have the guys that can have that in their game step up. GPL commented a little bit ago that Faber and Lacombe looked like they're kind of still recovering this past weekend. And those aren't guys that you think need to step up just because you expect it out of them. But I think it was Faber lost, whatever it was, 15 pounds or something like that. So those are guys that do need to step up and get back to their usual selves, because if you're playing with those guys at 75%, that's really going to hurt you. So that's a really good point by him. And if those guys can get back to full health, those are guys that you need to carry you. So hopefully they can do that next weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely agree, especially with the Nevers angle. I always feel like when the Gophers are playing just on their game, there's somehow a goal from Mason Nevers in there. But I think also, also on the back end with Mike Kester, I'm kind of partial to him as well. But I just think he plays a really good complementary game on the back end. But I think back to, I can't remember if it was against Michigan State or Penn State, but one of the last few, I think it was Michigan State, but one of the last few games of the year looked like a bit of a rocky start for the Gophers. There was kind of 0-0 through the first period. It's kind of back and forth right away. This is right after Wisconsin, I think now. But Brock Faber, he takes that puck in from the point and kind of skates it in just out of the corner and just through and just drives home for a goal. And boom, they explode for 3 more right after that. I think obviously being the captain, he's kind of the tone setter, I think, on the bench and in the locker room. But you got to think that a moment like that from him is needed at a really crucial point in the tournament. And you got to think to get past Canisius, I think one of those moments could very realistically happen against a team that has struggled against both Minnesota State and St. Cloud. And obviously very recently in the tournament to Minnesota State. So I just think, Brock Faber is going to be extremely key to setting that tone and to being a difference maker. I mean, to being kind of not necessarily offensively, not necessarily the same type of individual goal that he did that in that game, but to really spark some energy is the same way that Nye's Cooley Snuggerud does. Just, I mean, every shift too. I mean, it's so exciting to watch too. And I think just I want to get your guys' thoughts too. The missing link, especially. We talked about depth kind of being key to that national championship hope, but do you think there's anything that this team is necessarily missing to realistically hit that national championship level? And if it's missing or if it's something that needs to elevate itself, what are your guys' thoughts on that in terms of, obviously we've praised this Gophers team for being so deep and so great this year. And obviously it shows in the results so far, but if you think they're going to fall short, how do you think that is, and what can we look for if they're going to fall short?
I mean, it kind of goes back to just if they lean on the first line and Faber to win it for them, like that's not a winning recipe. Like, could those guys do it? Sure. It's going to be ugly and it's going to be an absolute battle. If they're the only ones that are really showing up and consistently bringing what we've seen, it's a tough climb.
I mean,
I'm not
for
sure
me,
what else you want to. Go ahead, Nate.
I was gonna say, for me, the big thing would be just it's a hot goalie, or I mean, a lot of this team's coming in. You've thrown Canisius. Barchevsky has been their goalie has been really hot lately. Played really well. You can run into hot goalies. You can have an off night, and it's really just being able to kind of be able to find one, be able to kind of control possession, play their own game, and not be chasing everything for the Gophers. The tough thing in the losses to Minnesota State the last two times is that just they weren't able to get 1-8. They led 1-0 in the Frozen Four game last year, but it was pretty much on the one opportunity that they had for about a period and a half, and you're waiting for Minnesota State to kind of just open the floodgates. Now, at this point, you feel like Minnesota is probably able to be the team that can play that game. But are they able to kind of still win these 2-1, 3-2 games that you end up with a lot of happens in the NCAA tournaments? The conference tournaments this weekend, other than the Big Ten, were all these 1-0, 2-1 games that would go to overtime. People are trying not to make mistakes. And goals were at a premium. We know Minnesota can score. We also know Minnesota has a top 10 defense in the country. But at the same time, are they able to win games like that? And we've seen them be able to win games like that at times this year during the regular season, but the postseason is certainly a different animal.
Yeah, I think the only thing that can bite them in the butt is like the different style of hockey. Like you just said, all the games were 1-0, 2-1, and then you look at the Big Ten games, and Michigan and the Gophers are kind of happy to just trade chances back and forth. Like, here's a turnover at the blue line, go ahead and take a quick 3-on-2, and like the teams are okay doing that. But the other games are 1-0 because these teams are not doing that. They have 4 guys in their neutral zone. They have 4 guys in their D zone back quickly. And if we go in trying to play that brand of hockey, like, it's going to bite us in the butt pretty quickly, and you could be going home pretty soon. But I don't think there's anything you can add to this team. Like, this historically one of the best Gopher teams that we've ever had and ever watched. So if they don't get it done, there's a lot of other good hockey teams out there, and it is what it is. But I don't know what else you could add to this team unless you want Ncaa to come back for another year and you want Cooley to stay for 4 years. But
no, let's be real though. Like Deegs was saying, it's not a done deal that Ncaa is gone after this year. With how much we've seen Kyle Dubas hanging around, like, that just tells you it's not 100% yet. Which, could you imagine if they brought that whole first line back? That would be electric. Curious, though, from your guys' perspective, we've seen Ncaa peppered in the chat a little bit. I'm kind of curious, like, what are the odds of a Gopher winning the Hobie, and who do you actually think's got the better candidacy between Cooley and Ncaa?
Ncaa has the better candidacy, just the combination of what he's done. Coming back another year, I think the issue with Minnesota is especially all of them, like they got the 2 in the top 10, but it almost feels like all their candidates, because we mentioned you could have Snuggerud, you could have Faber, you could have Lacombe, like you could really legitimately have 5-6 guys like be in that top 10 and you would blink an eye. But the issue, I feel like they all kind of cancel each other out. There's no one that you look at it and are like, this is somebody who dominates, this is someone who's the best player in college hockey this season. They're all elite college hockey players. It's the top line is one of the best lines in college hockey in the last decade. I mean, you'd probably have to throw them up there with the Michigan CCM line. You could put up the North Dakota CBS line. There's several very good lines that they're in that conversation, but it's just really tough to kind of see where exactly you'd fit one of the Minnesota players as the best player in the nation. I think that's kind of where someone's going to come short.
I'm just going to let this comment sink in for a little bit. For the people that can't see, Ramsey's stash is 11 out of 10 from the City Life Project.
Underselling it.
Yeah, 11 out of 10 is underselling it. That's absolutely correct. I guess moving on from that, I guess I'll move into just about Matthew Ncaa too. I think I definitely agree, Nate. I think it's Ncaa. I think back to last year, kind of when he and Ben Myers were kind of the tandem. And I think some people, I don't think a lot of people, but some people did worry that like, oh boy, is Ncaa going to be the same guy without Ben Myers? and he's the same guy, but a lot better than he was last year, obviously. And he really took that step that everyone was expecting him to take, but I think in the back of people's minds, they just worried a little bit. There we go, 100 out of 10. But I think Nye's just really, really stepped up his game this year, and it's just been incredible to see how much he can change the game on his own. I think Cooley can do that too, but I think from just a complete perspective in terms of like, obviously Cooley's super quick and he can just dart into the offensive zone and kind of create a chance. But I think Nyes can do. He's obviously not. I don't think is the same skater that Cooley is, but I think combined in terms of making a physical play, back checking, his neutral zone play without the puck is just crazy. Because I mean, he turns every opposite chance into a potential scoring chance the other way. And because Cooley can just jump so quick and get back into the offensive zone, and bam, they got a chance. So I definitely would have to lean Nyes. I think if a Gopher wins it, I think he's just been the complete package so far this year.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, and I got to throw this in there too, just because like it'll have Isha rushing for like the Kirkland sized lube. Like if you're Matt Nyes, like why not play another year or two with the Gophers? Like by all notes, he loves being a Gopher, loves being in college, and then he can go to whatever team he wants. Say, I don't know, the Arizona Coyotes with Logan Cooley, with Austin Matthews, who's probably going to head there as soon as he's done with the Leafs. I don't know. It seems like an awful lot to walk away from and say, oh, I'll just sign with the Leafs.
Hoppy's got a Wild jersey up, but I think it should be an Arizona Coyotes jersey behind him. He seems like a pretty big Coyotes stan right now. So
Isha just hates Toronto. So
okay. And he's Canadian, I guess, so he must
their jerseys though, second to none.
Oh man. I think I gotta have just one more for everybody here before we kind of wrap up the show. But obviously we talked about predictions, I think, for the Frozen Four. We do think the Gophers are going to get past Canisius, and I think general consensus is they can exercise those demons against either St. Cloud or Mankato, but make it into the Frozen Four. I mean, do you think, especially if they hit Michigan again, do you think this could be the year they get the national championship? And I think, Jack, I guess we'll start with you. Do you think they can get to the game, and do you think they can get the first national championship to Dinkytown in 20 years?
Man, this is, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like in the past few years you could have a Frozen Four that has, it seems like, four juggernauts. I just think those all these one seeds are really, really good teams. But I think the path is absolutely there. I mean, you look at the other regions, and I know the three Minnesota teams, but like the Denver region, I'd rather play the Fargo one 10 out of 10 times than go to have to play that one for sure. But yeah, I think this is setting up for it. I don't think we can get a better team than this. There's not a better team than this in the pipeline for us either. Like, this is our chance to take it. So
yeah, this is the year this is the team for Minnesota. I mean, it's tough to win a national championship. It's tough to put yourself in that situation. I always go back to that 2012 to 2014 stretch where I think the best team of the three was the one who didn't make the 2012 made the Frozen Four, 2014 made the national championship game. I think 2013, the one they lost in the first round, was the best team. So the best teams don't always win the national championships, but at the same time, this one is very set to win. What would be really interesting is the fact that you really have the top five teams in the country have kind of separated themselves, which Minnesota, Quinnipiac, Michigan, Denver, and Boston University. So the Gophers, if they make the Frozen Four, they're going to play that Denver BU region. So both those, if that ends up happening, one of those two teams, those are both really, really good matchups. I think that I really want to love to see a Minnesota-Denver matchup, and heck, a Minnesota-Michigan one. Those are three insanely entertaining teams. We're kind of really spoiled this year in college hockey, just with a number of talented teams, the underclassmen. We have a lot of players who are veterans who have that extra COVID year still around, but just there's so many freshmen and sophomores who are putting up fantastic numbers and doing big things and doing things that we haven't seen in generations. That it's just, I mean, it's really fun to watch. And I think the Gophers can certainly win a national championship. This is probably the team that this team can do it. There's several times this season watching them, I'm like, this is a national championship team. But I mean, they play the games for a reason. So
I love though, Nate, how you like very politely skirted the topic of Quinnipiac being overrated. I thought you did that very gracefully. I don't know.
I have thoughts on Quinnipiac if you want to get into them, but
I mean, we certainly can. I'll just say right now, boys, like I'm ready to be heard again. I'm good. I'm locked in. I'm ready for whatever happens here. And it should just be said that my fandom runs so deep that I have not purchased flight, hotel tickets, anything yet, because I know that as soon as I do, the Gophers will lose. So I'm literally going to be there the second that game's decided. I'm going to go buy all my shit then, and I'll be in Tampa.
I mean, you got to like all those opinions there. And I think certainly, yeah, Gophers fans, I think at large should be ready to have their hearts broken again or have their hearts hurt, because opportunities like this, I don't think come around a lot. And I think we were saying it during the season too. You just got to, especially while it's happening, enjoy the ride. You got to, don't worry about if Nyes or Cooley are coming back. You got to just enjoy what they're doing right now, kind of capture the magic, bottle it up, and run with it. And we'll see how long it can go. But, oh, wow. Sorry, I had to pause and read that question there. And then nothing. Then Adam Wilcox got his first Gopher shutout. I think it was October 28th, 2012 was the date.
I remember it was like a Sunday. It was a really, really weird game. Yeah. Kyle Rouse scored like on the opening shift. And then it was pretty much, I think the Gophers put up like 49, 50 shots, something crazy.
Boy.
Brian Deutsch would know. Brian Deutsch loves himself a 1-0 Gopher win, like more than anything in his life. So it's less work for him. Yeah.
Oh man, but I guess we'll see what happens in Canisius matchup round 2. I think that'll do it for us at the Sota Pod at NCAA. But thanks everyone for tuning in. Again, the Gophers are going to play Canisius at 8:00 on Thursday night Central Time on ESPN2, and then if they beat Canisius, they get to play either St. Cloud or Minnesota State at 5:30 on Saturday. So that'll be on ESPNU as well. So, but we'll obviously talk to you then, and I think we'll probably do another show somewhat like this. I think if they make it to the Frozen Four, no, nothing's set in stone yet, but we'll hopefully get some of that set up for you. But thanks to Nate, Jack, and Hoppy, obviously, for coming on. Thanks to everyone for tuning in, but we really appreciate you all listening. But until then, I think what was the tagline we used to use, Nate?
I don't even know anymore.
I think we'll see you at the rink.
We'll see you at the rink. That might be.
We'll see you at the rink. All right. Until next time, we'll see you at the rink. And everyone going to Fargo, definitely take pictures and let us know. Let the MNCAA Pod family know you're there.
And everyone go out and support our great partners: 7th Avenue Pizza, Northland Vodka. Be careful on that though. Don't pump Parrish too much before the Huskies are eliminated. Waggle Golf, get your waggle on.com, and Better Edge, BETTOR edge.com/sotapod, free $20 of legal gambling. Thanks, everybody.